I always kind of dread going to Hollywood events where specifically there's other people who I really admire. I always feel like I'm saying the wrong thing. But the thing is, and I find such comfort in this, almost every single person who is also at that event has the same anxiety.
Welcome to How to Fail, the podcast that believes that most failures can teach us something meaningful. Jesse Tyler Ferguson's family had no connection with the performing arts. His dad was a microbiologist for the military, his mother an OB/GYN nurse. But as a child growing up in Albuquerque, New Mexico, he was taken to see a production of Alice in Wonderland. And that was that. He joined the Children's Theatre at the age of 8 and after high school attended the American Musical and Dramatic Academy in New York. He became an acclaimed Broadway actor, appearing in a variety of plays, including On the Town, A Winter's Tale, and Spamalot. Recently, he won a Tony Award for his starring role in the 2022 Broadway revival of Richard Greenberg's Take Me Out. But the part for which Ferguson arguably remains most famous is that of Mitchell Pritchett, the highly strung lawyer in a long-term gay relationship on the hugely popular TV sitcom Modern Family. It was a role that earned him 5 consecutive Emmy nominations, a legion of fans, and much critical acclaim. During its first season, Time magazine declared Modern Family to be the second best American television series of all time, just behind Mad Men and ahead of Breaking Bad. His other roles include the movie Cocaine Bear, an appearance in the Taylor Swift music video for You Need to Calm Down, and most importantly, being a father to 2 young boys with his husband, the lawyer Justin Mikita. He also has a successful podcast, Dinners on Me. Despite appearing to be exceptionally gifted at almost everything he turns his hand to, Ferguson insists he doesn't feel that's the case. It's okay to excel at certain things and not others, he says. That's when I started booking work, because I was being truthful to the talents I had. Jesse Tyler Ferguson, welcome to How to Fail.
Thank you.
My husband, I think, is an even bigger Modern Family fan than I am and is extremely excited that this is happening. But I really liked that quote that you said about being truthful to the talents you actually have rather than trying to be brilliant at everything. How long did it take you to be at peace with that? Because as a musical theatre kid, you're kind of encouraged to be good in all areas, aren't you?
I gave it my best effort to be really good at everything. You know, I tried to be a triple threat, but I found as I was actually in the marketplace and I was auditioning for things and I was doing lots of things really poorly, I realized if I could just focus on the things that I do really well and, put my energy into that, I imagine I'll get better response. And that was exactly what happened. And so I realized I was enough with myself. Like I'd rather do one thing really, really well than a lot of things sort of mediocre.
I mentioned that production of Alice in Wonderland that you went to as a child. What was it about that production that made you fall in love, do you think?
I was a very shy kid growing up and I was, bullied a lot as a child. And I liked the idea of, there was something about being on stage that felt like a safe space, that you could be weird and be quirky. And yet that was celebrated rather than, you weren't singled out for that in a bad way. It was like you're singled out in a celebratory way.
We're going to come on to your childhood in more detail because it forms part of one of your failures. But I want to spool forwards now and talk about your first experiences as a professional actor and specifically one occasion where you turned a part down and people thought you were unhinged for doing it at the time. And it was Spamalot.
Yes.
Can you tell us that story? Because it taught you something very instructive about gut instinct, didn't it?
Yes, the original Broadway production that was almost 20 years ago, and I had at the same time been workshopping another Broadway musical called the 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. This musical had very scrappy beginnings. We started workshopping the show in the Berkshires at a cafeteria. We used our stage was a cafeteria of a school. We got paid, I think, maybe $100 a week during the workshops. Like I went into debt putting the show together, but it happened to be with one of the composers that I have always wanted to work with, William Finn. The very first Broadway show I saw was Falsettos by William Finn. I remember leaving that theater thinking, if I ever get to work with this man, then I will have made it. So here I am working on a new show with one of my idols, and yet I was being paid nothing to do it. And I was doing it because I believed in it so much and I knew that it had a bigger life. And sure enough, it ended up coming into New York City and going to an off-Broadway theater, Second Stage. At the same time, they were casting Spamalot, which was going to be directed by Mike Nichols. And it was going to star David Hyde Pierce and Hank Azaria and Tim Curry. Obviously, this was going to be a huge hit. Obviously, it was going to go to Broadway, and they were creating this ensemble of characters. And so I threw my name into the ring, and my agents threw my name into the ring, and I auditioned for the show. And, at the time spelling bee was not a surefire thing that it was coming into New York. And so I was keeping my options open, and I just kept getting farther and farther in the process. And I ended up getting an offer to do the show from Mike Nichols, the Mike Nichols, and who was making his return to theater after like 30 years of not directing a show on Broadway. It was all very exciting. And around the same time, it was looking like Spelling Bee was actually going to come into New York. And so I had to make a decision on which show I was going to stick with. And I could not imagine stepping aside and letting another actor take over all of the hard work I had put into creating this character from scratch. And, now I had the opportunity to do it in New York and show New York audiences what I'd been working so hard on, or do Spamalot. And I chose to do Spelling Bee, and everyone thought I was insane. I'm now 40, almost 48 years old. I am 48 years old. And I don't think I would have done the same thing now. I think I would have not been nearly as brave. But at the time I was in my early 20s, and I was like, I know what I'm doing. I really feel like this is the right thing to do. And Mike Nichols actually called me on my cell phone to ask me why I was turning down Spamalot, because, it took them a very long time to put this cast together, and they were excited by me, which was very flattering. And I explained to him sort of what I just explained to you, that this was a show. I was going to work on a show that I had been putting my blood, sweat, and tears into and had gone into debt doing, and I needed to see it through. I think artist to artist, you can't really argue with that. And so he said, okay, we wish you well. And the casting director of Spamalot was like, this was I think you probably burned a bridge with this man. Like, I don't know if this was a great idea. My agents and managers are all very nervous. But Spelling Bee ended up getting great reviews, transferring to Broadway, and we ended up being nominated for Tony Awards against Spamalot. And we were both shows were up for Best Musical that year. And I remember after the nominations came out, a lot of people were curious to see what the competition was. And I was doing my performance of Spelling Bee, and I looked out in the audience, and Mike Nichols was sitting there watching me do Spelling Bee. And of course I had just an immediate rock in my stomach. I was just petrified. And I went back to my dressing room after the show, and a few moments later, there was a knock on the door, and I opened the door, and Mark Nichols was standing there with his arms outstretched to me, and he gave me the biggest hug, and he said, "Always trust your instincts."
Wow.
And it was so gratifying, because this is the man who they told me would, blacklist me, basically. A little bit after that, they were doing a production of Spamalot at the Hollywood Bowl, and they asked me to play the part that David Hyde Pierce had played on Broadway, and I ended up doing it. And Eric Idle was part of that production, and a lot of the original cast members were part of that production. And so I got to end up doing it and becoming friends with Eric Idle, who then, I ran into last night, and he was so lovely with me. But it was a sign that these things do come around when they're supposed to. And I ended up playing a role at Spamalot, just not in the way that I thought I was going to.
100%. And I understand also that your role in Spelling Bee was the thing that brought you your first TV role.
Yes.
Which also ended up with you as Mitchell in Modern Family.
Right.
And if you'll allow me a couple of questions about Modern Family, even though I know your career is so much bigger than that. But it was such an important show. And as well as being important, obviously it was vastly entertaining and it was funny and it was moving and it was just all of the things that you want. I wanted to ask you how important it was for you personally, portraying, I think it was one of the first times, if not the first time, that a network had put a long-term committed gay couple with a kid like on primetime TV. How important was that for you?
I think you're right, at least in the sense of a comedy. I don't know if it had been done in a drama, but I think, when you meet Cam and Mitch in the very first episode of Modern Family, we're coming back from adopting our child. So you're being dropped right into the deep end of this relationship. I mean, they're not only a long time committed couple, but they are now first time parents. And that's where we're starting with them. So there was so much comedy, not just around, who they were as people, but also something that was incredibly relatable, like who they were as first-time parents. And I love that that's kind of where we led. The comedy was really about them trying to figure out how to be parents. And then, of course, the hysterics and the comedy behind that and just them being who they are. But when I read the script of Modern Family, I knew immediately that this would be an opportunity for visibility for the gay community. At that time, in the States, I think there was maybe 6 states where you could be married as a same-sex couple. And we were also in the throes of Proposition 8 had just happened in California, which took rights away from same-sex couples. So rights have been revoked in my own home state that I was living in at that time. And so it was a very hot button topic. And being a part of Modern Family felt like, okay, the easiest, the most surefire way to reach people is through pop culture and through their TVs right now. Like, we will be in so many people's living rooms across America. And it's such a great opportunity to let people get to know a gay couple and fall in love with them. And sure enough, that is what happened. And I do know that because I ended up going with my husband to talk with congressmen and senators and DC, and we talked to many people about trying to obtain marriage equality, and we were Barack Obama, who was the president at the time, we actually got to talk to him about it, and things were happening, things were moving, but almost all of them referenced Modern Family as being a really important part of that movement. So again, my instincts were correct that this was going to be something that was a pop culture touchstone for many people. And, for me, the challenging thing was how to do the job and not buckle under that pressure. Eric and I both felt extreme pressure at different times, and we had to relieve ourselves of that and remind ourselves, first and foremost, we're here to make people laugh, and that's our objective. And if they take something else away with that, then that's great. I had a little bit of an extra pressure on me just because not only was I part of this gay couple on television, but in real life, I was the one who was living as a gay man. So I felt like there was a lot of expectations from the community put on my shoulders, and I had to relieve myself of that and say, my job is to make this one person really relatable and really truthful. I can't be in charge of the entire community. Once I sort of took that pressure off of myself to be the voice for an entire community, I think I was able to sort of breathe into that character in a different way.
Eric, who you mentioned there, who played Cam, is straight. Mm-hmm. And I wonder what you think now, because times really have shifted and evolved, about straight actors playing gay. I mean, Eric's not the only one. There's your Matt Damons, there's your Jake Gyllenhaals. What do you think about that now?
So I think that's always been a conversation that has been had. I think with social media, it's more amplified now, and that it catches a little more quickly. People who are upset with that casting have a bit more of a voice, and that's heard a little bit more widely. I've talked with Eric about this. If Modern Family was being cast today, he probably wouldn't be as heavily considered as he was, almost 15 years ago when they were first casting the show. I was cast before Eric was. And I read with several different actors to play Cam, and many of them were gay. Some of them were straight. I read with people of different colors and different ethnicities. And there was no denying that Eric and I had chemistry, and there was like already an undercurrent of love there. And when I think about like the way the universe rewards you and tells you you're doing the right thing, I think back to my first meeting with Eric outside of our audition. When he got the role, we decided to meet and get to know one another since we're going to be playing, spouses. And we met for coffee at a coffee shop near me in Silver Lake, and there was all these people around us with boxes of chocolates and roses, and we realized it was Valentine's Day. We were both single, and neither one of us had any reason to celebrate Valentine's Day, and yet here we were meeting for the first time on Valentine's Day, and I felt like that was the universe really saying, yes, you two are meant to be together. It's meant to be you. So, when people are asking me now, like, what do you think about straight actors playing gay? I think, there needs to be a better job of looking for places for that opportunity to be given. I think people need to be able to get into the door in an easier way. I think there's still a struggle for gay and trans actors to get inside the room to even show what they can do. I think sometimes these decisions are made hastily, and I think roles are being given to straight actors who they think are going to be better for the box office and they're going to be a more surefire thing. I think that the roles are handed out a little bit more casually, and I think the opportunity is not always there. And I do feel, for me saying I only want gay actors playing gay roles, it's a complete contradiction to like what I want in my life. I don't want to just be seen as gay characters. I would love to play straight roles, and I can't say only straight actors should play straight roles and the gay actors play gay roles, because that's not what I believe. I'm an actor. I could play different parts, and I still truly believe that. But I do think that the industry could do a better job of finding opportunity for these people to be considered.
Final question before we get on to your failures. Modern Family, the clue is in the title. You did become a family of sorts. And I really love your podcast, In Is On Me. And I particularly love it when you interview your former co-stars from Modern Family, because there is such a special dynamic. And Modern Family came to an end just before the pandemic hit. And I just wonder what that experience of isolation was like, having spent so much time with these beloved people every single day, and whether you're still in touch with them now. Do you have a family WhatsApp group?
We do. But we do, yeah.
What's
not
called?
WhatsApp, but it's. Okay. I think it's just called. Well, we have Modern Family Adults, like it's just the 6 adults, and then there's a whole group one as well. And sometimes Sarah Hyland, she is an adult, but she's technically one of the kids on the show. She's sneaked her way into some of the adult conversations. But yeah, I mean, that last season of Modern Family, season 11, was sort of a bonus season for us. We were prepared to finish at season 10, and then the opportunity was given to us to continue. So we all wanted to do one more season and really truly make it our last, but then enjoy that last season knowing that it was going to be our last.
Let's get on to your first failure, which is that as a kid, you had a conspicuous failure to learn how to play soccer. And you say, and really any sport, when it seemed to be all my dad wanted from me. Yeah. So you tried, did you? You tried to be sporty.
I did. I think, for my parents, as they were, in hindsight, I know that they knew that they had a gay kid on their hands and they were trying to figure out how to, navigate that. I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. At that time, it was a very red state. Sports was everything. There was not really a great art scene there beyond, whatever community theater that I ended up joining. And for my dad, I was the firstborn of 3 kids. And for my dad, I think, I was the son he was excited to have, and he wanted him to play sports and do the things that he did as a kid. And I just did not have any desire. My heart was not in it. And I remember specifically with soccer, there might have been a point when someone tried to explain the rules to me, but I was not absorbing anything. And I just remember being so confused by what we were doing. And I would go to these, I almost call them rehearsals, these practices. And that's the first thing. Right? That would probably flag that it wasn't for you. Yeah, not for me. But I would go to these practices in the park, and, they put out the cones, and we would do games. And I remember my dad yelling from the sidelines, and, you know, I was always running the wrong way. And there probably was like disappointment from him to like, oh gosh, you know, he's not doing what I thought he was going to be able to do. But it all came to a head with my first official game. I was running out to the field with my, I was going to say cast team.
In your costume.
Yeah, in my costume. And I tripped over a sprinkler and the entire team ran over me. And I remember just being embarrassed and devastated. And I talk about the universe a lot, but I feel like it was the universe saying, I gotcha. Let's get you out of the situation. And I didn't have to play the game that day. I remember I sat on the sidelines with my dad and just watched the game. And now as a father myself, you know, my son, I take him to soccer practice and I sit on the sidelines and I watch him try and figure out this game. And he's in this place where he's like, he's actually way more into it than I ever was, but he's in this place where he's disappointed that people aren't sharing the ball. And I have to explain to him, well, that's part of the game, is for people to get the ball away from you and you have to try and get it back. And, you know, but we're also the place where it's like, we're talking about sharing and, you know, and it's confusing for him. Like, well, you told me to share and now you're telling me that it's okay to take this ball away. So we're in this like really confusing place with it. And I have my own set of frustrations watching him trying to figure out the game. So I have a bit of compassion for my dad in hindsight, watching my son try and figure out this game. But I think ultimately he's going to either respond to it and he's going to be great at it, or he's not. And I'm going to find something else for him to do. Like I recognize myself in my son, but I also see him already like being better at this thing than I was.
How old are your sons?
Almost 4 and 2.
Okay. So when you trip over the sprinkler and your entire team runs over you to get to the pitch, how aware are you at that stage that this is disappointing your father in some way? How much do you internalize that?
I mean, it's always the way you remember it is probably not as accurate as the way it actually happened. I mean, I was so young. I remember the way I remember it is that, you know, I was sort of picked up and I remember I was crying and I feel like maybe I even had a bit of a bloody lip. And I remember my dad feeling he taking care of me and saying, you know, you can sit this one out. We'll just watch the game. But I feel like I remember sitting with him knowing like, oh, this is not how he envisioned this day going at all. And like just being disappointed in myself and also maybe taking on a bit of his disappointment as we were watching these other kids do this thing that I think he was hoping I'd be able to do.
I heard you tell the story of how your sexual identity manifested itself with your parents on another podcast. And in fact, it was Judy Bowen's podcast, Quitters, which is such a great theme for a podcast. So I was like, damn it, someone else took that idea. And you told this story in a way that was very compassionate and funny in parts, but also very painful. And I'm also aware, talking about this as a straight woman myself, there's a whole language around quote unquote coming out that is not applied to straight people. A straight person never is expected to come out as straight. And so I want to preface this discussion by saying the language is inelegant. But would you mind exploring that with me and what happened with you telling your parents, or rather them being told on your behalf that you were gay?
The reality of the situation was I was caught stealing gay porn when I was very young. And I had stole it, you know, a few magazines before in the past. And so I had a stash of, you know, this material at home. And I finally got caught stealing it. And I was brought into the back room of the store and they called the cops and they called my parents and they showed my parents the nature of the material. I remember that so specifically, that phrase, the nature of the material I was stealing. From there was a lot of just like awkward silence. Like we didn't talk about it, even though it was like this thing that was just lying out there that we, you know, was front and center. It was in the open, and yet like no one knew how to talk about it. I certainly didn't have the tools to talk about it. I was just, you know, a kid. My parents really didn't have the tools to talk about it. And so I remember going to a therapist, and I think my parents were like, well, we'll have a therapist deal with this. And I just remember it sort of being a bit futile. Like it's sort of Like, I think they were looking for someone to sort of give them some answers on how to deal with this, or say, okay, we fixed it. You know, there wasn't like, I don't think there was ever, I don't think there was an open heart for them to, like, at that moment say, okay, we'll just learn how to love this new version of our son. That I think was always a suspicion of theirs, but never confirmed. So that was like kind of the first coming out for me, I feel.
And how old were you then?
14, 15, young. I was very young.
Yeah. And you ended up in front of a judge for stealing those magazines.
Yes. I had to go to court. I remember my mom with me at the courthouse, and the crime was committed on, like, months before, and then, like, later they had to, I was put in the system and I had to, like, wait for my hearing date. And so I think in that time there was a bit of healing that happened. My mom sort of just forgot about it, or was less angry about it, probably came to grips with it a bit, and just, obviously meditated on it herself. And she was easier on me. I felt like there was a little bit of understanding and passion that she was giving to me. And then when we were at the courthouse that day, months later, she ran into one of her patients at the courthouse, and it was like all that day one trauma was right back on the surface. And she was just really upset again, and how embarrassing it was for the family, and how embarrassed that she was that she had to see someone that she knew with her son at the courthouse. And I was given community service for probably like 3 to 6 months or something. I chose to be a teacher's aide at a preschool, which was so much fun. I love kids, and I ended up, being a nanny later in my life. So I think it was the first time I sort of realized that I was actually really great with kids, and kids loved me. And it was actually a really wonderful time. But it was community service. I wasn't getting paid anything. And there was a piece of me that sort of feels like an example was made of me in a way. And I think if that happened now, I think it would have been handled differently. At least I hope it would have been.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel so sad for you, even though you ended up discovering that you were so great with kids, which I can completely imagine. But the amount of misplaced shame that must have been heaped upon you, that was not yours to own, must have been so difficult for you to unpack.
It was 14. It was a very painful time for me. I felt very alone. I was never suicidal or anything, but I was definitely depressed. And it also reconfirmed my desire to get out of Albuquerque. I was like, this place is not for me. They do not understand me in this part of the United States. I need to get out. I need to go to New York. I need to take this passion that I know I have and go to the place where that passion's created, and that's New York City. I want to be on stage. I want a life in theater. And so it did confirm that for me, which I'm really happy about. And it also motivated me to make that happen. Like there was nothing that was going to keep me from making a life for myself in New York City. And, when I left home to go to school in New York, my parents and I hadn't ever had a conversation about my sexuality. And, it was when there was space between us that those conversations started happening through letters and in safer ways that felt safer for me, at least. And, it was slow, but I think we got to a point where it was out there on the table. And even though I feel like my dad had to be reminded a few times, I had to he would ask me about girlfriends, and I was like, Dad, we've done this before. And he'd be like, oh yeah, no, I know, I remember. Which is just the way my dad is. But, fast forward 2 years later, they're both dancing at my wedding to Justin. So they have come a long way, and I'm really proud of them. And I feel like the process has to be part of it. You can't expect people to change overnight. But you also can't always accept that people are set in their ways, and that they're like the excuse that, well, I was raised a different way. I just don't think it's acceptable. I think that we all have the ability to change, even if, you're over 50 or over 60, over 70, like you can always become a better version of yourself. And I challenged my parents to do that. And they did. They became better versions of themselves. And I'm really, really proud of both of them.
Now, you and I have something in common, which is that we're both married to men called Justin.
Oh.
And I have a theory that there are no bad Justins. I think it's a great name and it generally belongs to great people.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you.
And I wonder if I could ask you about your journey to parenthood. Again, I am someone who has gone through ultimately unsuccessful fertility treatment, but we looked into egg donation, all of that. And the next step was surrogacy. And it is one of those things that the way it's talked about often in our media, it seems totally straightforward, but actually there is so much emotion and pain that goes into that process. And I'm passionate about having these conversations and making them more mainstream. And so I would love to talk to you a bit about your journey to fatherhood through surrogacy and how it went for you.
Yeah, it's obviously something that's going to be different for everyone. I have gay couple friends who have gone through that process. I have straight friends who have gone through that process of surrogacy. It is the ultimate act of selflessness to be able to help another family have a child when they want one so badly. And can't have it on their own. We were open to adoption. We were open to other means. But for us, surrogacy really seemed like the first choice. My husband, Justin, was diagnosed with cancer. He had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma when he was 13, 14 years old, and his parents took him to a sperm bank before going through chemotherapy. So they had the foresight to preserve his genetics and if he ever wanted to have kids in the future. And so we really felt like we wanted to honor that decision that they made. So surrogacy was for us obviously going to be the first route. And we were successful. And I am so grateful for our surrogate who helped us through this process. I'm grateful to the egg donor who we've never met. I look at these kids that one of them looks so much like Justin and one of them looks so much like me. It's something that can never be repaid. It's quite remarkable. Our surrogate shared a story with us about having a pretty bad car accident when she was younger and surviving that and making a promise to herself that she wanted to help bring life to other people who wanted to have a family because she felt like her life was saved in that car accident. And so for her, it was also a healing process. And I'm so grateful. And, I hate that there's a stigma around it, specifically for women. I have a very, very, very close friend, Elizabeth Banks, who talks very openly about her surrogacy process. She told her kids, my mommy's tummy was broken. So we found another person who was able to bring you into this world. I don't know. I just think it's such a beautiful, wonderful thing that there are people out there who are willing to do that for us.
So beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And just to bring this failure to a close, although you might never have found your sporting prowess as a child, you are very into exercise though, aren't you?
I've gotten more so as I've gotten older, just because I want to try and stay, in shape. Yeah.
Didn't you used to get up at 4 a.m. and do a Barry's before you went on set?
Oh, yes. When I was, Modern Family hours are very, very early. And sometimes I would have to be in the makeup chair around 6:30 in the morning. And I lived about a 30-minute drive from the set. So I would occasionally wake up at like 4 in the morning, drive to a Barry's boot camp that started at 5, close to the set, finish at 6, get to my trailer by 6:10, shower, and then be in the makeup chair by 6:30. But then I was done working out for the day, and it was just a very, very, very early morning. Then by 3 p.m. I was exhausted and wanted to go to bed.
It's bad. Your second failure, which I'm not an actor, but I can entirely relate to this because I do write books. Okay. So your second failure is that even though for the longest time you tried to be an actor who truly doesn't read their reviews, that you failed and you absolutely read all your reviews. Okay.
I do.
So tell us why you tried not to. Like, did you have some stinking reviews that really upset you?
I think we all have. I mean, if you're an actor, you've definitely read reviews that are not kind. And the thing about not kind reviews is you could have so many great ones and you're going to focus on the ones that critiqued you. And that's kind of why I didn't want to read them, because if you take the bad, you also have to take the good, and you have to be critical about that. Like, and I also found that even good reviews, specifically for a play, that you're actively doing, that's the tricky thing about being a theater actor is, you do this thing, people come and critique it, they publish reviews, they're out there for the public consumption, but then you still have to go on stage every night doing the thing that you've been critiqued about. And I found that even good reviews tended to fuck with me. Like I would think about all the things that people said that were great about me, and like, oh, here I'm doing that thing that this so-and-so loved, and I wouldn't be present, and I would be constantly taken out of my body. So I thought the only thing I can do is not read reviews at all. I eventually read them. I think I read them close to the closing of the play, but I didn't read them when they were published. And then, of course, I wanted to read them, but I chose not to. And it was really hard. And then it was torture for me as well, because I was just so curious. I wanted to know what was being said. This is why I decided to start reading reviews. It's like, I just need to hear it from the horse's mouth. Like, I need to hear it as it was said. I don't want to hear it from someone who maybe is misquoting it. That's even more dangerous for me. So I started to read them as a protection to like protect myself from people who are going to tell me anyways.
And
but it's been hard.
Do you have a strategy now for reading any negativity and how you metabolize that? Have you come up with a coping mechanism? Because if you have, please, could you tell me what to do?
It is one of those things I remind myself. It's like, look, if you're going to take stock in the good reviews and if they're going to make you feel good, if people are going to say bad things about you, like, are you going to allow these to make you feel bad? No, I try and take the good reviews with a grain of salt, as well as I would take the bad reviews. And that's been my strategy, to try and not give too much attention to the good or the bad. I just feel like there's so many actors who say, I don't read reviews. And those are the actors I always felt were so cool. And I just wanted to be like them. And I wanted to like not have that outside influence. I feel like I'm always doing things the uncool way. Like all the actors I really respect don't read reviews, don't watch themselves in their films. And I just can't do it. And so I feel like I wish I could, but I can't. And I feel like that's been a failure of mine. Maybe I'll get better with it with age, because I do think that there's something about protecting yourself from any feedback while you're working, especially if you're doing something that you're still working on, like a play. Like if you're still having to go out there and present this thing, like it's best to trust yourself and not have that noise of an outside person. But I haven't gotten there yet.
I think it must be incredibly difficult, because also the art in acting is understanding human nature. Mm-hmm. And in order to understand human nature, you have to be empathetic and you have to let things in. Yeah. And so to insulate yourself from that completely and not to read any reviews seems counterintuitive.
Right.
So there's no question there. I just think it's an impossible conundrum and you're navigating your way through it.
Well, and usually, I mean, what happens is, everyone has insecurities. I have so many insecurities when I'm working, specifically in live theater, because you're doing it in front of a group of people. And there are so many times you're like, oh, I wish I could do that better. And there are so many insecurities that I carry out with myself. And it's one of the reasons I have stage fright, but I always feel like I didn't have that stage fright, then there's no reason to do it. I feel like from that fear usually springs a very good performance. But usually the bad reviews are always pointing out the things that I was already nervous about with myself. So I feel like they always just confirm what I was already kind of thinking anyway. So I don't know. It's like, sometimes I'm like, well, I already knew that.
Do you genuinely get stage fright every single time?
Every time before I step on stage, I get that anxiety of like, oh my God, can I really do this? And I feel like that fear is my friend, though. I do think that motivates me to be better. I actually really find that adrenaline rush and that sense of, is this even possible, to be really helpful in the long run.
Well, you absolutely can do it because you've just won a Tony for it. Yeah. And I wonder how that feels, because you had, as I mentioned in the introduction, you had the succession of Emmy nominations, but sorry to rub it in, you didn't win one.
No. So, but that was another, I never dreamed of being nominated for an Emmy. So that fact that it happened 5 times, there was a point by like the fifth one that I was like, okay, I think this one actually should go to me. Like every other year I was like, I'm not going to I'm not even in the running. But then there was like the last year I was like, I actually kind of might deserve it this year. And then I didn't get it. And I was
for endurance, if nothing else.
Yeah,
like an
for
Emmy
endurance,
for endurance,
if nothing else.
Yeah.
I remember Amy Poehler was constantly nominated for Parks and Recreation, and it was like her fifth or sixth time being nominated. And she, you have to go into these press tours after your nomination. And I read something she said to the reporters, and she was like, oh, okay, I get it. Joke's on me. Ha ha ha. Nominated for another Emmy Award. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. Like, I know I'm not going to win it, but like, okay, we're doing this again. Anyway, but the Tony Award I did win. But like, this is a perfect example of me being hard on myself. The person who originated the show I did, Take Me Out, was a revival. It had been done almost 20 years earlier. And the person who played my role, Dennis O'Hare, won a Tony Award for his performance. And so I went in and I saw it many times. I saw it 3 times, and his performance lived vividly in my head. So one of my demons with doing that show was to, create my own version of this character that I thought had already been done perfectly. And I did read in some of the reviews like, oh, he wasn't as good as Dennis O'Hare. And that was like my biggest fear going into it, that people were going to compare me to this genius who originated the role. And so winning that Tony was very meaningful to me, because my biggest challenge was to make people see validity in my version of it. And they did. I mean, they saw validity in it. They gave me an award for it. So, and I have since talked to Dennis O'Hare about it and have told him, I can't believe that I got to play this role and also follow your footsteps and win a Tony for it. And we both agree that we both feel really bad for whoever's going to do the next revival in the next 20 years, because the pressure's on.
Where have you put the award, Jesse?
It's just over here. My husband has, ironically, 2 Tony Awards himself for producing, and one was nominated and won a Tony Award before I was even nominated. And I would joke with him, was like, I've been in this business for 20 years and have never even been nominated for a Tony Award. And then you just dip your toe in, and your first thing that you produce, you get nominated for a Tony Award for producing and winning it. So
irritating.
Yeah, it's really irritating. Yeah. But we put them together. Yes.
Your final failure is meditation.
Yes. I feel like this must be a common one. Do you get this one a lot?
I've had it a couple of times before, but also it's funny because I fail at meditation as well. And you've spoken a lot about the universe, and ditto. I also believe in the universe and things unfolding exactly as they should. And yet meditation, is it just a waste of time, Jesse? Is it just a waste of time?
I don't think it is, because when I was really doing a good job with it, I did feel much more centered. Justin and I started to study transcendental meditation because we had some friends who really enjoyed it. But it was hard because it required you to find 3 consecutive evenings where you could go to these classes. And it was when I was doing Modern Family, and I had a hard time finding time to it was finding 3 days where I knew that I was going to be available at like 4 p.m. till 6 p.m. was nearly impossible. Somehow I found 3 days and I did it, and I was so happy to have it behind me. I was more relieved that I just had found time to do the class. Yeah. And then I was like, well, now I got to actually do it. And I was really good about it for a while. And it was just one of those things, with transcendental meditation specifically, you're meant to meditate for 20 minutes in the morning and then 20 minutes in the evening. So that's 40 minutes of your day that you are meant to just sit there with your eyes closed, letting your mind turn off. And I was just finding that really, really hard. And it got to the point where then I would only be doing one of the 20-minute sessions a day. And then it was like, well, I did that every other day. And now it's been months since I've done it. And it's something I really want to get back to, because I do feel like it was a grounding thing. And it was something I actually did look forward to doing. But this was also, I was doing this before I had children, and it's really hard. And I have people who have kids who are really diligent about it. And they find time to do it. And I'm trying to follow their footsteps and do a better job. But I just have not been good about it.
Is it finding the time that you find harder, or is it being able to switch your mind off?
It's both. I mean, with the morning meditation, it's like, well, I just woke up. I've just opened my eyes. Like, you want me to close my eyes again for 20 minutes? Like, I'm already thinking about all the things that I'm need to be doing as I'm getting out of bed. And especially now with kids, it's like they're going to be waking up, and we have an alarm clock in my son's room. It's a stop light, and so it's when it goes from red to green, that means it's time for him to wake up. And every morning we hear it's green, it's green, it's green, and like we have to go and get him out of bed. My morning, I need to sleep in as long as possible, and I don't have the time before the it's green, it's green, it's green to fit in 20 minutes of meditation. And once I'm with my kid, there's like a rocket. I'm on a rocket through the day. It's like there's no stopping. It's a fast moving train. So I got to figure out a way to have a better relationship with meditation, and I just have to prioritize it, because I do think it was really good for me when it was working.
Does Justin do it?
No, he's also been really bad at it too. He has done other things. He went to the Hoffman Institute, which he swears by and really loves, and that has been really good for him. And he's been very diligent about his practices with that. So he sort of moved away from the transcendental meditation. But that was the thing that it was easier to do it when we decided to do it together. Like, okay, let's meditate. And like, we both took the time. And now, we have to sort of divide and conquer. So I don't have him holding me accountable either.
Well, I don't know if this helps or not, but one of my earliest guests on this podcast was a Buddhist super monk called Haenim Sunim.
Okay.
And he was a super monk because he had over 1 million followers on what was then Twitter, which I found hilarious because it seems counterintuitive for a monk.
Yeah.
But I spoke to him about my failure to meditate, and I asked him for advice. And he said, the very fact that you are observing that you think you're failing at meditation is in and of itself part of the meditation.
Interesting.
Isn't that beautiful?
It is.
This is the first step of your awareness, Jesse. I've got hope for you.
I love that. No, that is in alignment with what I learned from my training, because there's like no bad way of doing it. And if your mind starts to wander, that's okay. That's where your mind's at. It's like, it is in line with, what I should be doing. Like if you're even thinking about it as a form of meditation itself, I think that's very helpful. But I also think like I need to now maybe take it up the next step. But thank you for sharing that.
You also think it's bullshit. No, that's fine.
No, I think it's very helpful.
In a way, we've both meditated today on this podcast.
Exactly. Yeah.
You are such a joy to interview. We love you, Jesse Tyler Ferguson. Thank you so much for coming on How to Fail. Please do follow How to Fail to get new episodes as they land on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please tell all your friends. This is an Elizabeth Day and Sony Music Entertainment original podcast. Thank you so much for listening.